Okay, right. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for attending our Zoom meeting. This came about because we now have quite a number of members and we get a lot of visitors. And over the last couple of years, there have been some concerns with crowding and quite a lot of visitors and some local pilots as well who aren't used to flying the coast, who don't seem to quite read it in the way that they should. Condors have been flying this site, or the coastal sites, and South Devon, North Devon as well, all the local clubs, been flying these sites since probably the inception of hang gliding, which, Phil, correct me, which is the best part of 50 years, is that correct?
Yep.
And Phil's been flying it on a hang glider, and then when paragliding started, on a paraglider, as has people like Mark Nichol as well, who's with us tonight. I've been flying since 2000 with a number of others, Leicester as well. And the coast is where we started. And the one myth I would like to dispel right from the start is that coastal flying is easy. And some clubs look down on coastal pilots because they seem to think that, oh, well, it's just the coast. Well, it's not. Coastal flying is technical, depending on where you go. The air is nice laminar air, nice and smooth. But as you can see by just looking at this photo, there's a lot of hazards. Our cliffs are steep. There's lots of technical flying to be had, wind directions you've got to be aware of, lots of other things. So we wanted to try and do this, and the idea of this particular talk is if you like it and you'd like to go a little more into the depths, if you like, of coastal soaring, then we can do another one. This is just an overview and to give some of the lower airtime people an idea of what can be done and how it all works. So this is a little PowerPoint of just some photos to start us off so that you can see what's available. And these are all sites that we've flown, most of them in the Southwest, all of them in the UK, and the views and the flying is stunning. So some of the sites you'll know, some of the sites you won't. This is Woolacombe, and I've put them in order of difficulty. This is one of the easiest coastal sites to fly. Now, I've not been to Rosylia in South Wales, but Rosylia apparently is very, very similar. And if you look at the photos and try and think about what you're seeing, you'll have an idea of the degree of difficulty as we move on through the slideshow. So this lovely, lovely site, beautiful rounded hill, lovely takeoff. You can top land, fly along. If you're bothered about the air, if it is a little bit thermic, because it does get thermic there, then you can fly out and land on the beach. There's sand dunes at the bottom, and if the winds are strong, sometimes the local pilots will be flying the sand dunes. So this is your starter site on the coast. If you're low airtime, this is the one place to go and get your hours up, and you could go round and round and up and down until you are completely bored or not. It's beautiful. This is Bossington, which is our own site. The Woolacombe belongs to North Devon. This is our site, and this site I first came across back in 1976 when I was privileged to carry, on our first date, I was privileged to be allowed to carry the back end of Phil's hang glider and walk all the way out. I was then allowed to assist with the launching and watch what was going on. And they even then allowed me to drive my van to the bottom and pick them all up and drive them all back up again.
You're not painting a very good picture, dear.
Several days doing this until I got bored and went off and rode on to the video. This again, lovely site, rounded hill, much higher than Woolacombe. Nice beach landing. The only thing with this beach is it shelves quite steeply towards the sea. So again, you want to get your landing right, but we do have some fields to land in just around the corner around here by my left brake. So nice site, good place to go if you're low airtime. You just need to be aware of the gorse at the top, which is liable to catch you, Richard. Is that correct?
Don't wear shorts.
Bad idea, shorts for flying. Right, this is Soilcroft. This is on the Cumbria coast. I think they've got 2 coastal sites. Faces west, southwest, I think. Similar-ish to Woolacombe at the dunes at the bottom. It's little low cliffs. And this particular day, it was the Lakes Charity Classic, which some of you will know and have been to. And it was howling, and it wasn't taskable up in the lakes. So we all came down to Soilcroft. A group, B group, and coaching. Got there, and Jockey, as you all know, Jockey, decided, yes, we can have a comp, it's fine. So basically, you put your wing up on the beach, you walk backwards, as you can see this guy doing, up the slope, and put your wing in the lift band, and away you go. We had, I think, on this little run, I think there were about 85 of us, all in the air at pretty much the same time. Perfectly safe, no problems, nice lift, really nice sight. Looking at the tide line, you'd need to be aware of what the tide is doing, because if it was high tide, it might not be so much fun. So that's Soilcroft. So back to the southwest. This is our beautiful beer South Coast Run, which everybody knows and loves. And you've probably all done it. And if you haven't, or if you're a visitor, then you will come and do it. Again, most of my photographs, I don't know why, but the tide seems to be out. So you'll see that there's plenty of beach. But again, if you look at the photograph, you'll see where the high tide line is. And if you're flying at any time, anywhere on the coast, just note where the high tide line is. And if you're aware of the tides, you'll know how much beach you'll have left once the tide comes in. Now, we had a little bit of history here for you on beer. In 2007, there was a ship being towed to, I think, Portsmouth, full of BMW motorbikes and all sorts of other things, and they had to ground it. They actually put it in and beached it here because the weather wasn't very good, and it stayed there for pretty much a year. There was a whole load of people on the beach once the containers floated ashore, breaking into them and nicking stuff. And this wreck stayed there, and we were able to fly out over it, round it, until eventually this is the back half of it, I think, and they broke it up where it was and took the rest of it away. So yeah, that gave us something to look at. And while they were blowing it up, I think we had some airspace filled, didn't we, around this?
Yeah.
Right, which I think we seem to navigate very well. I don't think anybody bothered too much, as long as we didn't get blown out. Yeah. So that was the Napoli. Again, you're all familiar with this. This is from Doghouse looking down towards Golden Cap, another much loved coastal run. I can't remember exactly when this photograph was, but there's a big slip here now. I might be just past the slip, I think. So when you're looking at the beach and where you're going to land, again, look for the high tide line and see where it is. And if there are slips, which there are along the south coast in lots of places, just make sure that wherever you land, you can get past the slip. Because when you get down there, they're a lot bigger and a lot wetter, muddier than they look from the air. So just make sure you land the safe side of the slip. Okay, so this is Isle of Wight. We went there for a competition, BP Cup, some years ago. I'd never flown the Isle of Wight. Small cliffs and great fun. Long coastal runs, similar, it's all part of the south coast really, like ours is. But again, you can see here, lots of slips, and at high tide, there's not going to be too much beach to land on. And some of these edges, because of the sharp edge, a bit like you get at Ypres, you're going to get rotor. So where you can actually take off and where you can land. We were taking off here, but there was a bit of a slope. And if you got your wing up above the rotor, you were fine. And then off you'd go and down the coast. So yeah, another bit of the south coast, really nice views. This is an old photograph from North Hill, as you can see from the wings and the harnesses as well. This is the Selworthy end of North Hill. where it looks round to Porlock Bay, which is here. Bossington is just round here. You're looking down the channel there to Countersbury, and nice hill to fly. You can fly all to the all out to the end, round the corner to Selworthy in the right conditions. There is landing here. You don't get below the top, because all of this, when the tide comes in, it comes in pretty much to the bottom. And if you do go down there, there isn't a way up the cliff. So you don't go down there. You don't get below the top. You slope land, side land on the top, whatever. If the wind shifts, you just need to think about these things. So we're increasing the difficulty now as we're going through. This is a site called Maker Heights. It's in Plymouth Sound. The breakwater's somewhere out here. And faces, remind me, Phil, easterly, is it?
I think so, but don't hold me to it.
I think it's the east. We were taking off up here. We were actually on a Condors holiday on Dartmoor, and we went with Jeff and several of the others here to fly. Took off up here, and then you could fly all of this. It was very windy out on the coast, and we were flying this, and there's an old Fort Picklecombe, and we're flying over the fort. Again, if you look at the terrain, places to land, well, my preference would be not to go down. I wouldn't want to lose height. I would want to get in somewhere that's sensible. You need height to fly these places, and you can see why, because really going down is not an option. You can get low if it's lifty and then come in, but don't go down. Countersbury, beloved Countersbury. It is wonderful. We have a hang glider in the picture. Which we don't often, but there you go. The aerial here at the top is where we take off, or further back below where this shot is taken from, there's the churchyard, and you can take off from the churchyard. This is incredibly steep. If you walk this path, people get quite nervous walking the path, then you walk around and then down on the shoulder, and then this bit you can walk right down to the lighthouse, which is on the corner, around the corner. This is walking across shale, this path, and it is as it looks, very, very steep. Height, Phil, 1,000 foot, is it?
1,000 feet sea cliff, yeah.
Really nice. Beautiful place to fly. Again, there is a beach. When the tide comes in, it comes right to the bottom here. There is a little bit of beach. They call it the Fisherman's Beach, and there is a path up the cliff, but the path up the cliff would take some walking. It's very narrow, it's incredibly steep. I'm afraid I wouldn't want to do it, but it is a beautiful place to fly.
And the boulders on the beach are average car sized, so you don't want to go down there.
This would have. This site belongs to North Devon. The takeoff is up here. It's a beautiful run all the way down. Clovelly is around here to the left. Again, it's the sort of site that you need to know. You need to be very well briefed. There's a number of things here. There's a helicopter refueling spot now behind. When we first started to fly it wasn't there. So now they're very careful about briefing and knowing when the helicopters are flying. If you ever wanted to go there, you'd need to look at the North Devon site guide and get all the information. This site is only flown at low tide, because even though the cliffs are low, you could come back, and if there isn't any lift, you're going to be on almost no beach. And again, not always places up the cliff, but it's a lovely site, very nice to fly. This is Trent's Show, again, a North Devon site, and this is technical. This is no bottom landing, absolutely nothing. And the run is all the way up. This is Countersbury that we looked at just now. You can fly all the way up to Countersbury, over Countersbury and on to Porlock. Beautiful run in the right conditions with height. Height, Phil, to do the run?
Anything above the top. No, I mean, seriously, you on 1,000 feet, really, sensibly.
At plus some, really. I mean, you've got 1,700 there, so yes, definitely. This is just an overview. I'm not going into any great detail about this. I just want to show you what some of the coastal sites are like. Again, no bottom landing. So you don't go below the top, you stay at the top, and that's it. This is another run, North Coast run. I think this is the South Devon site, it's in their site guide. And beautiful run all the way up to Hartland Point, and very technical. Needs particular wind conditions, and you are flying, again, if you look at the tide line, if you go down here, you walk up the path, you wouldn't necessarily want to go in on there. And there's a number of little coves where there is no way up the cliff, there is no signal at the bottom. If you go in there, you might need to be helicoptered out, and I believe one of the pilots was, who ended up down the bottom. Ringstead, this is a Wessex site, sorry, my brain's gone there. Beautiful, this is the far end of, or towards the far end of the run coming back, and it was a lovely day and I flew it. I think this might be Russell in front of me. I was at the back. I was a bit late. We were a bit late getting down there, and they were all on their way back as I was flying down. Beautiful site, again, very technical. Spine back, as you can see, and limited landing. And you know, you need height for all these sites, all these places. You need height. This is St Agnes down in Cornwall, another North Coast site, and you can see here there really is no bottom landing here, ever. I don't think the tide's ever gone out there, not to my knowledge anyway, but so yeah, you can see the North Coast. North Coast is a whole different ball game to the South Coast. It's beautiful to fly, it's absolutely stunning. So that's my first little bit. Now what I want to do is take you to the maps. Now I'm going to try and, if this works, full screen. What I wanted to show you, and Phil and I have talked about this a bit, is what's I think happens is people come and fly the coast, but they don't actually appreciate what the coast actually looks like from a map. I love maps because they tell me all sorts of things. I know people now tend to use Google Earth and
have you got to share screen? I think.
Sorry, yes. Screen share, stop that share. Oops, let me go back. Sorry, John. Let me come out of that a minute. Right, we'll do a new share. Good job you reminded me. Share screen. Share, thank you. Right, can you all see the map?
Yep.
Thank you. Do remind me if I'm wrong. What to do? Stupid thing. For some reason, it won't full screen for me. Ah, there we go. Right. So looking at a map, you can see why certain sites work in certain directions. Now, here we've got our good old run at Deep. So you can see which wind direction is needed to do some of our runs. And you can also see, if we zoom in a bit, where the hazards are. At least I hope you all can anyway. Ideal wind for Eep, Phil always says is southwest, you say, or southwest?
Southwest, I'd say.
Because
if you look at the screen, you can see that the main line of the cliffs, the whole run, not particularly small areas. If you draw a line along the along that coastal run, the average direction is pretty much southwest. They do fly it well off, but if you theoretically, that is the best direction.
So if we have a look, if you fly to Charmouth, if you fly around Golden Cap and you fly on to Charmouth, it's pretty much faces the same direction. Once you start going round here towards Lyme, you can see why it doesn't necessarily work. And some lower airtime people I know are getting all very enthusiastic and very keen as to how far they can go. But you do need to be aware that when you get to this point, you could be in rotor from here, depending on the wind direction and the strength of the wind. And similarly, when we go to Beer Head, we had somebody, Tony, tried to fly Beer Head in an easterly. Was that right?
Hang on, Viv, that sounds as though I tried.
No, we had a visitor who you had a complaint from, didn't you?
Yeah, he said that he tried to take off to the east of Beer Head and wondered why he couldn't actually gain any lift. He ended up in bushes rather than, very, very luckily, rather than tumbling down the cliff straight into the sea. He has been advised. He did put in an incident to the BHPA, though, thankfully.
He did. He also wanted us to update the site guide to say that you couldn't fly it in an easterly.
Yeah, you can't fly it in a bloody northerly either.
We said nobody's ever tried, but there you go. Right, so the other little thing here, and Neil I know is going to go into a bit more depth on some of the sites. I'm just giving you an overview here. For the guys who are now coming across Sidmouth, basically because the gliders are an awful lot better. Years ago when I first started, crossing Sidmouth was a big ask. And if you got the other side and didn't land on the beach, then you were doing well. But with the new wings, they're much, much better. Once you're coming around here towards Ladram, you're coming out of wind. And people might be caught out if they're not thinking about wind direction and how strong it is. There are quite a number of hazards, as you can see. What's required for the run is a whole lot different than what's required here. You can get around here and it's probably okay. But if you lose the lift going back, it's actually a reasonable glide to the beach. And if the tide's coming in, it might be a tad on the tricky side. Let's have a quick look at the north coast here. Our lovely run here. Trento Show here is Phil north, really, aren't we, to do the run?
Yeah.
Well, northerly, really. You can see from the coast. And again, counter-spree flies in these directions. You can see you can fly it in a north or northwesterly. And again, come back down here, Bossington, northwesterly. North Hill, people think it's north. It's not. It's called North Hill because it's north of Minehead. It doesn't take a northerly, and it's also a spine back. So there are hazards there as well. Right, I'm going to stop that one. And I'm going to go to Google Earth, and Phil is going to give us a quick resume, and I'm going to try and fly it in Google Earth here quickly. This is going to be interesting. I haven't used this for a little while, but we'll try and you tell me where you want to go. And so we're taking off, right? Okay. Give us the hazards then, Phil.
We need to share screen again, Viv.
Yeah, I do. Hold on. So,
Your head's disappearing, Tony.
it comes and goes, doesn't it? Yeah, right. Can you see Google Earth? Are we at Seatown?
We were.
Now we're at Eep. How's that?
Yeah.
Good.
Ace.
Right, let's see what happens. Right,
Prior to landslip, I think. Is it?
Whoops.
right, there's the caravan park.
Yeah.
Okay, so explain the hazards.
Hang on,
briefly.
where are you starting from? Can we go back to takeoff?
Can you see back to takeoff? Right, there you go.
Well, if we
Takeoff
start
there.
from takeoff.
Okay. Just give us an overview because Neil's going to do in depth. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, an overview. The site it's a cliff site. The problems tend to occur when it's windy. If it's light to moderate winds, where are you going? Can you zoom in on takeoff?
I can.
Sorry, it's
No, it's all right. There, right. I'm zooming in on takeoff. There you go. How's that?
that's it. Back a bit so you can see the cliff. All I was going to say is you can see it's a sharp edge cliff. So even in good conditions, people must be aware of rotor, and that's what seems to catch most people out. The problems tend to be very basically taking off. You've got to put your glider in the right position so you can actually pull it up in some sort of air that's going the right direction, and then walk towards the edge and take off. Most people seem to have problems with either not being able to get the glider up or whipping it up too quickly when it's stronger and getting pulled back to the back of the takeoff into the hedge and into the fence. But as you can see, if you take off and turn left, you're in a bowl with a sharp cliff, a sharp edge, rotor there potentially. But as I say, Neil's going to go into more detail. So if we then turn right, as if you're flying on the cliff, you cross the first gap, which is deep. And again, bear in mind that when you cross gaps, don't fly inland, fly out over the beach, out of the sea, because if it's windy, you tend to be pushed inland. This applies pretty much to every gap you cross, whether it's here or the beer run. Don't let yourself be drifted inland because wind will funnel up the valley and you'll be stuck. It's particularly low air timers on lower spec gliders. But if you go along and carry along, once you get across, the cliff works well. And as Viv said earlier, bear in mind that each time the cliff changes direction, there's a risk that you might get some rotor or some turbulence. I mean, here is not too bad. If the wind's right for takeoff, you should be fine. But always be aware, fly out. How can I put this? Fly out over the sea more than a lot of people do. We see so many people flying over the cliff, back over the top of the cliff. There is no need whatsoever to fly back there. The thought of it scares me because if you do have problems, you're in rotor. If you've got a slow glider, you'll get stuck. So many people say, oh, don't want to fly over the sea. And as a friend of ours said to Viv years and years ago, you can't drown at 1,000 feet. You really are much better out of the sea, and you then have some control over where you might choose to go. Right, if you carry on up the coast, again, crossing not a very wide gap, but reasonable, stay out over the sea, don't get blown inland. Now you're coming up to Golden Cap now. If you go a bit further, can you move it on a bit? That's right. This is probably the biggest problem when you go down the coast in this direction, because if you think about the map, look at the terrain, you can see there that the piece of cliff that you have to cross actually faces southeast, where Viv's moving the cursor, and you can get turbulence if it's off to the southwest. Where Viv's cursor is, you will get turbulence. We've had people crawl around the front of Golden Cap, down below the green growth, right down on the rocks, and it's a stupid idea because, as you can see, there's quite a lot of non-landable area down there, so why risk it? So don't
this is low tide as well. Remember that at high tide there is no beach there, nothing.
And the thing is, what you don't want is to get a collapse or have a problem, realize you're too low to turn back, but can't get further along, so you end up landing directly below, and you could be stuck between landslips on a small bit of beach getting smaller. So Golden Cap is the biggest obstacle on this particular run. But once you get past Golden Cap, as it's a high cliff, you can get a lot of height and you can then charge along to Charmouth. Again, bearing in mind, there's quite a length of low cliff here. And again, like Viv keeps saying, when the tide's in, there's not a lot of beach. And even if you can land, it's a hell of a walk either way, Charmouth or back to Ypres. So just bear it in mind. And again,
at high tide, there isn't any beach.
No, I mean,
you won't get off.
There might be patches at certain times of the year, but I wouldn't want to risk it. And now you get to Charmouth, on the high cliff there, you can get some more height and build up your height, and then you can go across Charmouth to the golf course. Again, bearing in mind that crossing across an open mouth, the wind funnels in. Again, not a problem, but if you're landing at Charmouth, bottom landing, you'd be surprised how windy it can be, which just proves the argument, where the cursor is now, that's the landing there, which is a good bailout if the beach is covered at high tide. But you can go on from there. go along to Black Ven and up to the golf course. And again, as with the Sidmouth run, the further you get along here, the more the whole coast is going off of the wind. I mean, I've got as far as Lyme before hang gliding and paragliding years ago, but as you can see, it's quite a change of direction. And you know, we have the hang gliders have landed on the cob at Lyme Regis, but they can get into wind a bit quicker than the paraglider. But that's about as far as you can go unless the conditions perhaps are a little bit more southerly. And as you can see from that diagram there, you need southwest to get to Charmouth, you need south to carry on. But that's basically, as I say, you can see all the potential hazards just by looking at the Google Earth. You can see where the tide line, as Viv said, where the tide line goes. You can see the shape of the cliff. So again, lots to look at on the coast. Not by any means as nice as people sometimes think it could be.
Right, if I go back now to my presentation just for stop share, and I do a new share. Just a minute. Hold on. Bear with me. Share screen. And go back here. Share, and then I want to go to my last slide. Right, so we just made some little points for people who are new to all of this. The main things are, where are you going to land? You must have a safe landing when you're flying the coast. I know we say this inland, but inland you've got, if you're going over the back inland, you've got a lot more choice. You know, or you can find a little field here or a park there or something. When you're flying the coast, 50% of your area that you can fly into is basically unlandable. So you need to look at the beach because that's pretty much where you're going to go. You aren't going to go over the back on the coast. You might end up getting high, really high, and get blown back if you can't go forward. But the way our cliffs are, a lot of places you wouldn't want to go inland. You really wouldn't. And the other thing is you're probably not going to be high enough anyway, because you just aren't going to get that sort of height on the coast. Just very occasionally you might. Some place you might, but most of our places you're not going to get high enough to go downwind and run away. When you're flying, look at the wind direction. If you don't have instruments, turn right, turn left, and try and look at the ground, look at the beach, look at the bushes and see, is the wind going off? Because if the wind goes off the hill, you're going to be flying a different hill. And it's more important on the coast than it is inland, because most of our hills inland are rounded hills. They're not too tricky. On the coast, from the photos you've seen, you can be behind buttresses and all sorts of things, and the rotor goes along as well as up and down. So do think about that. And the wind speed, the strength of the wind, if you start to see white horses, then really you need to be thinking about landing, because as soon as we get white horses on our bits of coast, it means it's getting strong, and it's going to get stronger. What happens usually is we get one or two little white horses popping up, and then you get 3 or 4, and then fairly soon on we've got quite a lot. If you're not getting the height that you got on your trip out, even if you're just going down to Sidmouth and back, or just down to Thorncombe even, if you're not getting the lift that you were getting, then possibly the wind's gone off the hill. It's, you know, gone off one direction or the other, or the wind strength is dropping, in which case, can you reach the landing? Don't go on flying when you haven't got anywhere to go. The other things, and I'm sure Neil will go over all this again, is our beaches are getting very busy. Don't land where there's lots of people. Buy yourself further down the beach, out of the way. Most people park in the car park, walk down to the beach and sit. So just stay out the way. And do remember that wherever you're flying, most of our sites, the coast path crosses the site, pretty much everywhere that I can think of. So be aware of people walking who might not be paying you any attention at all. and let them pass first. Do check really carefully, not only for people in the air, but for people on the ground. And just make sure they've seen you and they're not chatting as a group and haven't seen you. So give them priority. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. That's it from us. I think Les Phil's got anything else to say?
No, I nothing at all. As I say, as Viv says, to reiterate, you must have a safe landing option. People seem to get into trouble by carrying on, and then they suddenly say, oh, I lost the height. I didn't expect to lose the height. If you aren't within striking distance of a safe landing at any time, as you can see from some of the pictures, potentially you are in serious, serious trouble.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks,
Thank you,
Viv.
Viv.
No problem.
Over to Neil.
Yep, thanks guys. Thanks for that intro. So we have just got a couple of points. I think that Russell has brought up specifically in the chat at the moment. First one is about the wind varying, and I think one of the significant factors with coastal flying is people tend to be in the air for quite a long time, because the lift is not guaranteed, but the lift is in a known area. People tend to fly for quite long periods of time. And what you've got to remember is that the wind when you take off is probably going to be different to when you land, or potentially different. So a variation not only in strength, but also in direction. And we often see it at Eep where, you know, takeoff is okay. Coming into top land can be a very different matter half an hour or an hour later when you've done the run all the way down to Charmouth. You come back, there's a few white horses. And, you know, the prudent thing is, especially Eep, where the walk up is, I think, if somebody can correct, I think it's like 60 or 70 meter takeoff height. It's always safer to go to the beach if the beach is there and available. If you have any doubt of top landing, head for the beach. Eep is obviously slightly tricky as well with top landing because it's such a small and such a small takeoff and landing. It slopes away. It has the edge at the back. It has the fence along the back. Thankfully, the fence now doesn't have barbed wire on it. That was changed towards the end of the summer by the campsite, and we're very grateful for that. But the fence and the hedges claims a lot of people. The other problem as well is that when the wind is off at Eep, because of the complications of having the West Bay cutting and the Eep mouth cutting, the winds can actually be doing some very weird things up the back. And I think Tony probably won't mind me mentioning the time that he got caught out and actually got flushed away from the takeoff. Tony?
Yeah, carry on, Neil. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think the video is online somewhere.
Yeah, it's on the Condors website.
Yeah, got flushed away from the takeoff over the bushes at the back. As I was actually up on the beacon watching at the time, and as Tony turned to get himself back over the cliff, hit a huge slug of rotor in the little valley behind and got dumped in the trees. Sorry,
Neil, if I may just add to that, I just landed at the time, and it wasn't the easiest one, but I got down absolutely fine. But within seconds of me landing, I felt the wind switched 90 degrees, and I think that must be the effect of Eep Mouth and West Bay, as you were saying.
Yeah, I think so. I think if the wind, you know, we see it in rotor on takeoff, that in a pretty much due southwesterly, there's very little rotor on takeoff, still some as the wind builds up. But as the wind moves off, especially I think more towards the south rather than the west, we see a lot of rotor coming over takeoff. And you have to be quite creative sometimes in how you lay your wing out and where you lay your wing out. So it's not impossible to get off of takeoff. I think that the problem really is not so much takeoff, it's coming into land, because the rotor coming into land is going to potentially hurt you. whereas the rotor on takeoff messes your wing around. You can have some little collapses. You do have to be careful getting off, but coming into top land can be tricky. And as I say, really with Ypres, it has plentiful beach at the bottom, although in the summer it can be busy, but there are always places to land on it safely. Even with the tide in, although it narrows, the beach is always the safest option, always. And if the wind is picking up, it is definitely the place to go. And it's not much for a walk up, you know. Or the other option is, that many people do, is they actually park at the bottom and then land at the bottom anyway, and you walk up to your car and you're gone. But it's the much safer option, especially as the wind increases. So yeah, that's a good point, Russell. Both wind direction, wind strength is potentially going to change while you're flying. Don't trust that it's going to be the same when you land or when you come into land. So the other thing Russell brought up are sea thermals, helping you with direction. Actually, Russell, could you just expand on that in terms of what you mean by that?
Take, for instance, the last time we flew at West Bay, I actually took off at Cogden Beach because it was already strong when I arrived there. My first attack is go to Cogden first, check it out, then move along the coast. So I knew it was going to be strong and get stronger for the forecast, but I was very surprised, as you quite rightly pointed out with the photograph, at the ridiculous height I was getting out over the sea.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to venture in a different direction to the wind. I knew I had plenty of height, and I could use that height to play around.
Yeah, I seem to remember that day hearing you either on radio or on Zello, Russell, saying something like, I'm at 1,200 feet, and I could see you. You were way, way out over the sea and not going down. So yes, so in that instance, yes, it does allow you some more options, and it's really those options that can allow you to go further along the coast, always bearing in mind that you've still got to land somewhere. And it's an interesting point, actually, Cogden, because it goes back to something Viv was talking about earlier. So it seems in the last year or so that Cogden is now being used more frequently, I think, to launch in higher winds. So that's fine, but what that means is if you're having to use Cogden to launch, the wind is already quite high. You're already almost saying, I'm not going to launch on the normal takeoff. I'm going to launch at Cogden, just walk up onto the low cliff, duney type issue there, and then fly the coast, which is fine, but the wind is already near the limit.
No,
So,
can I interrupt just for a second? That is not advice to any low air timer.
No, I understand that.
All experienced pilots that use Cogden Beach, but we knew what the limit was going to be according to the forecast. It was well within our ability to fly at that speed.
Sure. Sorry, Russell, I wasn't directing anything towards you guys that used it that day. All I'm saying is that and going back to the site that Viv talked about earlier, up in Cumbria, you know, it's fine. You can do that. All I'm saying is that the wind is going to be quite strong if you're having to launch on the beach, which means you have to then consider on any particular day what the forecast is going to be in terms of the wind potentially increasing while you're flying, and also having somewhere that you can land safely. So that's another consideration. But yeah, Cogden is useful in that respect, that if the wind speed is getting higher, as long as you take all the other factors into account, it can be used to launch quite successfully.
Just a proviso with that, it is not for low air timers.
No, it's not. As I say, you know, if you're having to launch on the beach, you're already at a limit, and also potentially the wings that are being launched on the beach, not only are they generally experienced pilots, but they're also they're not going to be A's or low B's. So there's a little bit more leeway in the wings that are being launched. And that actually brings us to another particular point about wings that are in the air, because we see it not only at coastal sites but inland sites as well. The fact that wings might be in the air at any particular time doesn't necessarily mean you, I, or anybody else should be in the air. I've seen many times at Bell some of the guys on D's and uncertified wings flying quite happily in conditions that, frankly, I wouldn't even want to get my wing out of the bag. And that's fine, but don't be in a big rush to get in the air sometimes if you see wings in the air, because it doesn't necessarily mean you should be in the air as well, coast or inland. I wanted to bring up a few specific sites, and in some ways this will go back a little bit over what Viv and Phil have already looked at. So I'm just going to share my screen because it just highlights some of the particular dangers that are on some sites. And some of you may or may not know this site. So this is not a Condor site. This is actually a Wessex site. This is St Aldham's Head. But it's useful because it shows us a few things. So this is essentially a westerly site. It's Kimmeridge. Kimmeridge is just over here on this side. It's just off this view, if you can see it. That is the Kimmeridge Ridge. Kimmeridge, by the way, is a bit of a mix. It's not on the coast, but it's very close to it. A very interesting, nice ridge to fly. Very bumpy, very thermal on the right day. But back to St Aldham's. So St Aldham's, the car park is back here. A little car park here. You walk out onto the cliffs. Westerly track of wind coming in. And the launch is just a small area here. The launch is not huge. It's relatively steep. But it's okay in the right conditions. The interesting thing here is that essentially we're back to a no bottom landing. There's a very small beach here, very small beach. But anywhere here it looks like you could land. This is all boulders. If you go back onto what looks like a flat section here, this is all bushes and tall bushes. Blackthorn, rip you and your glider apart. So very little landing. One maybe very technical landing just here. If you're good at getting into a tight spot, you can land here. It can be top landed. In fact, it can be top landed all the way back to the car park, and it's possible to fly over this section and land back by the car park if you have the height in either this field or the field in front. The other issue with this is one of rotor. So this is Houndstown, I think. Russell might correct me.
Yes.
Yeah. So if the wind is due west, you're fine. If the wind comes round a little bit into the south, again, you're going to be fine. The lift might change, the lift might drop off, but you're going to be fine. If it comes slightly into the north, Houndstown now starts to come into play. This starts to generate, I would guess, quite sizable amounts of rotor coming back over this area. So now that can affect where you top land. So this area starts to go into rotor. If for any reason you're forced this way because you get low, you're going to get further and further into rotor. So this site has, a number of hazards. You have to fly it. You have to be certain of staying up, and you have to be certain that the wind direction is not going to go appreciably north of west. Very, very, very nice site, but it does have some issues. Now, the other site around here is, we come back this way, which is flown a lot more often and by a lot of people, is Ringstead. So Ringstead, I am just about there now. Ringstead, for those that don't know it, it has a launch hill with a National Trust car park where you can park. It's set back from the sea. It's just here, and you have to make a transition across onto the main cliffs, which are over here. And the transition itself can be challenging depending on the wind direction. So you get as much height as you can on this ridge, bearing in mind there are often aero modelers at one end of it. There's the public to deal with. We have it at Ypres, we have it at a number of other sites, and I saw some messages coming in from North Devon the other day talking about the general public. And the general public are a hazard. We're a hazard to them, actually, more than they're a hazard to us. So getting dragged, if you're not confident with getting your wing above your head, being dragged into people, potentially at Ringstead into cars, is a real possibility, and it can hurt people, not just you, it can hurt other people, dogs, children, fishermen on beaches, the general public are a problem at a lot of sites. And it's for us to look after them, not for them to look after us. And I think it's something we need to be conscious of. At Ypres, we often have people sat on the chairs, on the benches that are now, there's 3 of them along the fence line, and it's very easy to fluff a landing or fluff a launch and end up being dragged into not only the fence, but into the people sat by the fence. So we have the same at Ringstead, cars, people, dogs, children. It can be a challenge actually reaching the cliff, especially if the wind is slightly off. But the real challenges are probably further down. And I think for many in Wessex, they consider this to be one of the more dangerous sites. So it's a long cliff run if the wind is south enough. You can go all the way down through to Lulworth, to Kimmeridge, and in fact, actually beyond Kimmeridge in the right conditions. But there's some hazards on the way. If you needed to land, if the wind drops, there's a great beach here. Nice long beach just here. The trouble with that beach is it has Bat's Head at one end, and it has a cliff at the other end. So it's a sea-locked beach. There is no way off that beach without some form of intervention, either Coast Guard, RNLI. You won't get off that beach. Obviously, if you had to land it, but at least you're safe. It's going to cause a lot of inconvenience, but you're safe. But it can be landed, but obviously try not to. I believe, Russell, maybe again you can correct me, I believe people have landed that beach in the past. Is that right?
Yes, no matter how many times you tell them not to go round the corner because the direction is wrong, they end up on that beach. And we've had at least 10 rescues, line rescues, Coast Guard rescues off that stretch of beach.
Yeah, and that's the point really there, Richard, isn't it? Is that it's actually a direction thing, mainly with the wind there.
Yeah.
That if you go around the corner on the wrong direction, actually you can't get back.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And the other beaches here, so this is Durdle Door. Again, a beach, this one you can land, there's a path up. The difficulty in the summer is that beach is absolutely packed. I mean, I guess a lot of you probably remember the pictures that were in the papers and on the TV of Durdle Door Beach being packed over the COVID era. So possible to land it, yes, but tricky because of people. The other issue with this piece of coastline is all of the variation in where the cliffs are. So this is Lulworth Cove. So you can track down these cliffs. The question is what to do here. So we have a low set of cliffs at the front, a high hill, high ridge at the back, whose name escapes me. But there are 2 possible routes here. Many people take cross over onto the back one, but there is, especially in certain winds and certain wind speeds, significant rotor potentially in this area around the cove. I've been in it once. It was not pleasant, frankly. So again, you have to be extremely cautious of how these front cliffs can affect what looks like an extremely nice route at the back. In certain wind conditions and certain speeds, certain directions, what looks like a very tempting route can become a very rotary route.
Can I interrupt you there, please,
Yeah.
Neil?
Sure.
Don't forget that the Army Rangers are there. And
Yeah,
you need,
okay.
You need
Yeah.
to check the firing times.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to come on to that actually.
Sorry, okay.
Yeah, no worries. The Army Rangers actually start about here, and they extend backwards. Obviously, you can see them on the maps. They are either active or inactive, depending on a NOTAM being generated for that. Generally, the general rule is during the week they are active, but they're also active on some weekends. And the Ministry of Defence actually issue a notice that gives you, I think it's at least a month's worth, maybe 2 months worth of advance notice of when the Rangers will be active. You can search online and find that. But this is an area from here to almost Kimmeridge Bay to across here is within the ranges when they're active. So you won't be able to fly any of this. But again, we see another change in direction here in the coast. We come out to Kimmeridge. It is possible on a good day to cross Kimmeridge Bay. But you need to bear in mind, the performance to do that, the wing you're on, you have to be very careful when flying Kimmeridge Bay. It isn't done often, but it is done. But you have to be extremely cautious. So that is Ringstead. I mean, we've gone through that quite quickly. Ringstead is a huge run. When it's working, it's extremely good. Many people fly it, but it does have quite a lot of risks. The other thing, let me just see if I can find. So I think, as we said, one of the significant factors is landing. Having somewhere to land, having somewhere where we have enough beach to land, or we have a reasonable top landing, is something that we always have to bear in mind. And state of the tide is often the key factor. Let me just find a photo if I can. Sorry, my screen's just done something very weird. So let me, sorry guys, I've lost my, but actually let's have a look. Let's have a look what can happen when you get wrong. I'm just going to show a photo here. I'm sure Steve won't mind because he posted it recently. I know he's not with us here tonight, but he's going to. So let's see. Can you see that? Can you see Steve? Right.
Yep.
So
Yes.
Steve was recently flying Ballard. This is the Ballard Cliff up behind him. Not a site I've flown frequently. Basically, a few took off and everything was going fine. So Steve took off not very long later. I think he was saying it was sort of 10 minutes later, 5 to 10 minutes later, took off. Conditions had totally changed. completely, whilst the others had gained height and had options. Steve had none, and he flew along the cliff hoping to get height, and ended up, you can see the look on his face there, because he just landed in this boulder field. And yeah, this is one of the problems with the expectation of people flying, see the wings, they can be fine. The next minute you take off, conditions have changed, especially on a site like this where there's limited bottom landing if there's no lift. And Steve ended up here. He was fine. I think a few bruises, but he was okay. But it could have been a lot worse on any particular day. So yeah, so having a good bottom landing option, making decisions early. I think Steve would say in this particular case, the lift wasn't there, and instead of pushing on looking for it, what he should have done is actually gone to the beach, which was further around. But by the time he made that decision, he couldn't make it. I'm not sure what you guys can see, but my computer has just crashed.
Oh yeah, it has.
It has. Oh yeah. It's gone black.
Oh
It's
no,
been all sorts of weird things. I don't know what
we
it's
got the photo back now. We've got Steve back.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, I haven't got. So I've got no control over it at the moment. So, so I think I can't even see if there's anything on chat. Have you got any questions?
Well, we could open the mics and ask anybody if they have anything.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? I've got a limited ability to do anything right now.
Can you unshare your screen, Neil?
Yeah, I'm going to try.
Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's
Hey, there we are.
that's fine.
Okay, all right. My screen's gone really weird, but that stopped the share, yeah?
It has. Yeah, we've got it back. Could I just add one little thing, because I've seen it catch out a number of low air timers, and that is if flying at somewhere like Ypres. Yeah, and as Neil has said, the great thing about Ypres, it's got a brilliant bottom landing. At least it has when it's not covered in people. But I have seen low air timers not being aware enough of precisely what the wind is doing to know in which direction they should land. And then the other thing is, which can be a bit of a shock, because I still remember it was to me, you're flying in a nice, lovely wind. You come in to land at the bottom of Ypres, and suddenly you're going into this zone of no wind. And suddenly you've got a very high ground speed, or apparently it feels like a very, and then people start to go on the brakes and brakes and brakes, and that has caused problems. So I always included that in my briefings with low air timers, well, not just at Ypres, but at any coastal side as well. Speed's your friend, and keep the energy in your canopy to do a really nice flare at the end. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, often on the beach, it's generally it's a low to zero wind landing, often, unless the wind is really has really picked up. There was a few other specific things, so I was just trying to get my computer back into some sort of semblance. Well,
the other,
sorry, Neil, carry on.
I was going to say one thing that caught me out last year, if I can, let's see if it'll share this. Oh, right, it's working again. One thing that caught me out badly last year was orographic cloud at Ringstead. I think this picture was taken that day, but it might have been another day. Orographic, I've flown it quite a few times, and you can surf up on top of it. It could be great, and it all looks brilliant when it's like that. The problem is, on one particular day, at Ringstead, a bank of orographic came in that was really just full. It was a whiteout. So it started like this, and within probably a few minutes, suddenly another bank came in to a complete whiteout. So you're flying, white everywhere. You don't know where the cliff is. You don't know where the water is. You don't know whether the orographic actually extends to the sea, to the ground. You know nothing. Fortunately, I had mapping on that day because I don't always do it at the coast. Since then, I always do it at the coast because it's the only thing that kept me away from the cliffs. And I actually got almost back to launch in a complete whiteout just from having mapping on. And fortunately, I actually was going to go to the lower landing at Ringstead because I didn't know if it went all the way to the ground. So I got on the map till I was sure I was over the lower landing field, and I was already losing height. I popped out, fortunately, just in time to be able to see the top landing, and I just managed to sort of get in on the slope. Just as Sean's feet appeared from above me, and just off to my left, Sean Staines, he dropped out of the orographic right next to me and just landed about 10 foot away. But it as I say, I didn't often actually use mapping at the coast because I just didn't really need to. I think it was a good lesson. I always now use mapping just in case something like that happens. The other issue is, assessing everything correctly and saying, well, orographic is great, but is it going to get worse? And there are some lessons certainly to be learned about forecasting there and looking at the forecast ahead. So that's another particular danger of the coast is the formation of orographic and actually how much forms and how quickly, because it does just suddenly appear. So it can catch you out, and it can catch you out. If it catches you out in the wrong place, you can be in real trouble with a complete whiteout. So that was just another point. But,
okay, thanks, Neil. Everybody now has their mics available. If you'd like to ask questions. Has anybody got any questions?
Wow, we've covered all the points. How amazing is that?
Have we got any lats on the call, by the way?
Not very low air timers, I don't think. I think most have done a fair bit.
We've got
good. Well done.
Yeah.
I haven't flown Be Ahead, and it's sort of number one on my list of places to come to. And I mean, everybody keeps mentioning you can have the rotor. From the cliff face affecting takeoff. I'm assuming that when I come and fly it for the first time, some of you jolly folks will kind of point out where this rotor will be, how far back it extends, how high up it goes, and that sort of thing.
Not at Beer Head. We don't get rotor at Beer Head. At Eve,
no.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But not really at Beer Head. And to be honest, Jerry, if it's flyable, there'll be at Beer Head. There'll be a million people there.
Yeah.
The great thing about Be Ahead, it doesn't have such a sharp edge. Well, there is a sharp edge, but then it kind of curves around, which helps quite a lot.
The only thing to mention about rotor at Beer Head is the stack. It has reduced over the last few years, but it is there nevertheless. Just don't fly behind it. It's obvious when you get in the air.
Can I add something about Beer Head and no rotor? Because I actually went to A&E from Beer Head. my first flight there. This will take a little 2 or 3 minutes to tell you this tale. But my first flight there was with John P. And not that he was anything to do with it, but it was quite windy, so it took off fine. Went up like an elevator to probably 500 feet above takeoff or something like that, just like that. And he got a bit cold, so he went into land and to put some more clothes on. And as he went into land, I thought, oh, well, John's going to land. Maybe I'll go and land as well. Practice landing. So I did big ears to get down. But this was, years ago. I can't remember when it was, like 2014 or something. But it's the first time I've been there. And somehow in my head, you know, if you look at the map and you see where takeoff is, I had a green patch in my head that went all the way to the east edge of takeoff.
You mean,
in my mind? So
you mean
I was
east or
actually
west,
coming
John?
down with big ears towards the east of takeoff, thinking all that patch was okay for landing, you see. And then when I got a bit lower, I suddenly thought, oh, takeoff's up there. And I thought, oh, I shouldn't be here behind the cliff. I better get out again. So I started to go out and wallop. I ended up sitting down on the ground very hard, enough to burst an airbag, which is fairly hard.
Yeah, I don't think Jerry will be getting the site brief to go anywhere near there, John.
No.
No, but just saying that Beerhead is a place where if you get it wrong, which I did on that occasion.
Yeah, we don't fly
Luckily,
the
I didn't
east
hurt
side
myself.
of Beerhead, John.
Pardon?
We don't fly the east side of Beerhead.
I wasn't flying the east side. I was coming in for landing.
Yeah,
No,
but
I
you're
know
on the
what
east
you mean.
the east-facing slope. It slopes
No, it wasn't
down.
the east-facing slope. It was a south-facing slope, but a little bit to east of where you take off.
Yeah,
It's-
because from
lower
takeoff,
down.
it drops down to the eastern-facing cliff.
Yeah, but all I'm saying, I didn't know that at the time, but in my mind, I had an idea that the green landing area extended right to the east, which I obviously got wrong. Yeah, there.
So I think what you're saying is, so you were trying to land or thinking you could land around here.
Well, not quite there so much, but a bit closer towards the takeoff.
Okay.
A little bit more over. A little bit more
So
over. But around about there is still a lot lower than takeoff.
Yeah, there's takeoff. There's the normal takeoff in that region. I think you're
Yes.
probably moving here. You're right.
Okay, yeah, probably a little bit
By
round.
yeah, it does. It as you were saying, it drops away here. This, although you can't really see it here, that don't know whether we can make it so you can see it. Oh, you can see the slope there. So I think you were probably trying to land here then, John. The takeoff up here, and there is like a little step there that you can't really see.
Well,
and yeah, probably
Basically, I was coming round to take off, but I got myself a lot lower than I needed to, and suddenly realised I was going uphill to take off, and I thought, get out of here.
Yeah,
But
sure.
as soon as I pointed towards the cliff, or just went to the cliff, and suddenly I got walloped. And I only went to check the A&E that there wasn't any damage before the weekend came, because I thought I don't want to go to A&E in the weekend. And luckily I was okay, but
Yeah, going back to what I think somebody else was just saying also about rotor at Beer. So the thing that can produce rotor is this stack. And I think, Viv, correct me if I'm wrong, the stack used to be a lot higher, didn't it? It was before my...
Yes, I was trying to find some photos of when it was higher, because I remember it many years ago when we first came there. It was like a chimney in front of that other piece, but as you can see, if down on the beach is quite a lot of what used to be the stack.
Sure.
I couldn't find any photographs that gave it. It's been falling away, we thought, Phil said, probably for about the past 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
And before that, it was a proper chimney, and you used to have to go round it.
Yeah, and actually going round it is still the best option, because
to be honest, if people haven't walked up the footpath, if you walk up the footpath from the beach beyond the stack, those trees are full-size trees. They don't look it when you're flying over. They look like bushes, but they're actually full-size trees. If you did go in there, we'd probably get you out.
Yeah, I think it was the second time I flew there, and maybe the first, no, probably the second time, I actually did go round the back thinking I had enough height, and I was wrong. I had quite significant height. There's a little bowl. You can't really see it on this picture, but that's almost like a little bowl here. And somewhere up over here, I hit really, really nasty rotor, probably the first rotor I've really ever hit. And it was very nasty. And even though the stack actually looks quite low and quite benign, I think, especially with the wind is off a little bit, it can send rotor back over here and then back up over this edge.
I did actually talk to probably 3 pilots back in the summer, the end of the summer, and said to, I watched them come in that way and land, and I went to talk to them and I said, look, please don't do this. Somebody came in front of me, and so they just followed. The thing is, somebody might be okay, but several somebodies might not be. So I did say, please don't do that, because one day somebody will go in there. But everybody's getting very blasé about that now, which is another of the concerns with people who are not experienced coming and flying. And I think it was a number of Wessex pilots that were actually doing it. I didn't know who they were, but I did actually speak to them.
Okay, and actually going around the front of the stack costs you nothing. It actually gives you some lift. It isn't like transferring from launch onto the main cliff by going around.
This wasn't so much taking off. This was when they were coming back into land.
Yeah,
they were coming back down the main cliff, and instead of coming around the front, they were just cutting the corner. Which, if you're plenty high enough, is okay, probably. I don't do it, but you know, people do it.
Yeah, going around the front is the safe option. No rotor. You don't really lose height, maybe just a little bit, but you're back onto the cliff here. There really isn't any need to go behind the stack.
Neil, you've got a funny echo thing going on.
It's an awful lot of feedback, probably two devices,
machines.
I expect.
Yeah.
Okay, it's muted on this one, but
yeah. I just checked that you muted on one of them, but it's still doing something weird.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it only just started?
Well, it's been going on for a few minutes.
Okay.
2 or 3 minutes.
Anybody else got any questions?
Yeah, I haven't ever had a decent landing at Beer. Where's the best landing spot at Beer? I always end up a little bit too far back from launch.
When you say a decent landing, do you mean not a stand-up landing, or what sort of landing?
Well, coming in and you're not it's not like a roller coaster, sort of rotary.
Which way do you come?
I
round the front of the stack, or do you cut across?
Come in from the sea and cut round the face, but in
come over the stack and round.
I find it tricky.
Are you coming over the stack and round, or are you cutting across from the main cliff?
I'm coming around the stack and cutting in.
So this one?
Yes.
Okay, and once you come around the stack and you're facing the cliff, what are you doing?
And then coming over and finding I've got a bit too much height, and I'll end up just flying off the end, and I end up coming back further, trying to lose my height, but it ends up being sort of a bit rough once I came far too far back. And
if you look at the ground when you walk out, it actually drops away. There's a high point, sort of where Neil's got his mouse now, more or less.
From my hair.
There is fine. Once you start going further back, the ground drops away towards the cattle grid where you come in.
And it also drops that way as well, doesn't it?
So if you go too far back, what you want to do is do your sort of downwind leg. Don't go too far back. Follow the line of where it starts to drop away, and then just do a nice turn, because where Neil's got his mouse now, if you turn at that point and wait, keep your hands up, and you'll be out of the lift and you'll just come down. If you start bell ringing, then it can be lumpy. You can get a little bit of chop there, but it depends on the wind strength. The stronger the wind, the more you'll bounce about, but just wait.
Where Neil's cursor was just back then, where the concrete patch is, never, I try and make it a rule never to go back further inland from that. Make your turn there and face into wind, and you'll just come down really neatly.
Probably
And
around-
also just east of that bank of gorse and stuff, because the land starts to go away on the west side of that. It starts to drop away there. And I've seen pilots get dumped a little bit towards where the corner of the field is. Yep, that's the ace place to land.
That's perfect. Yeah, it's nice to have some visual references, because when you're coming in, it's hard to see sort of slopes away slightly.
The problem is, if you come forward from this is now sloping away, so you're trying to land as the land is dropping down towards the cliff.
If you've got too much height, James, when you come in, if you've got too much height, just go round again, because as soon as you start to fly forward, you can have another go. Just do a couple of circuits, fly out over the cliff, line yourself up, and come round again.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, I really need to get a feel for whether it's doable. Not be afraid to have a
just do some passes and see what happens. And the other thing is, if people are coming in front of you, try and work out exactly where they're landing and what happens to them.
Yeah,
the site is big enough that if you come back near that concrete patch, there's plenty of room to actually S off height. You only need a couple of S's and you'll drop easily 100 feet very, very gently.
Yeah.
The term Viv used, bell ringing, is that sort of just tapping the brakes to try and
bell ringing? Yeah, sorry. People are pulling one side, then they're pulling the other, trying to get the wing down, and all that happens is they start oscillating basically. And if you get it wrong, you'll get a collapse, or it's just messy. You're disturbing the wing when you're on sort of final approaches, or you're in your landing area. You want to keep your hands up, you want to keep your speed up, and little tiny movements, small movements side to side. If you have to S, if I'm going too far forward, I might do a little figure of eight, so I'm reversing, as it were. I've reversed into fields a number of times when it's been strong, and little tiny movements, small movements when you're close to the ground. Don't ever do big ones.
Okay, everyone, it's nearly 9 o'clock.
I think
Any
done?
more questions?
Okay.
No. Okay. Viv, Phil, Neil, thanks very much indeed. I found that very interesting.
Thank you all for listening.
Well done.
No
well
problem.
Done.
Yeah, well done. Thanks everybody.
Hello, folks.